So, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight to talk to Kristina Liu. And Kristina is the author of a book called The Inside Out Journey, an Elusive Search for Self Across Three Continents. It's a story of travel and transformation. She shares her experience traveling the world for a year while working and all the learning and transformation that she gained along the way. She visited 12 cities in 12 months. It was both an exciting journey on the outside and a powerful one on the inside. And she says that it allowed her to get closer to her true self, become more courageous, and learn profound lessons about life. And that all sounds great. Following that journey, she established a lodge and retreat center where she conducts life transformation programs and hosts travelers who want to explore the Peruvian Amazon. So she's also a professional certified coach and a mental fitness coach who helps entrepreneurs and corporate leaders maximize their potential at work while experiencing more happiness and fulfillment in life. That is a lot, Kristina.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for that warm welcome. Wow, you summarized the book better than I could have done myself. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for this opportunity to come on tonight.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. And if it's okay with you, I might just dive into the questions.
Sounds great.
Okay, so if you could think back, what was going on for you in your life before you entered the remote year program, and what led you to decide to spend a year of your life traveling around the world while working?
Yeah. That was a long process. So the very beginning of it was actually on a trip that I took through Croatia, France, and Italy. It was one of those epic trips. This was 3 years or more than 3 years before I actually joined Remote Year and did this year of travel. And on that last day of that trip, I was sitting in southern France in this quaint little restaurant and, sipping my French wine, eating French food, and then just looking out into this beautiful scenery. And then I just started crying because I was thinking, wow, I have to go back to work. And actually, I just want to keep doing this. And so that was really the starting point of this idea forming in my head that I want to travel more extensively rather than this 2 to 3 week vacations, every year. And then the occasional business trips that I was taking, and all of them were great, but I just felt like I really want to do this more extensively. And then, time passed and I even thought about, perhaps taking a gap year like some people do, but I didn't end up doing that probably because I actually still liked my job. It wasn't that I hated my job. So then I continued. And the other thing happened, which is I started doing a Doctor of Psychology program, which is the other thing that kind of was fulfilling me because I was starting to ask a lot of questions within. And I think that's basically a theme that was happening. On one hand is I do have this passion for travel, as I'm sure all of you do being in this group. But on the other hand, I was at that point in my life where I wanted to discover myself a little bit more. I was about 33, 34 at that time. And, you're starting to ask some of these big questions that I didn't really have a lot of answers to. And so I thought, studying Doctor of Psychology, that was, was a subject that I had always been interested in, but I never took up because of this practical side of me. Because I, went for an accounting degree and then went for an MBA, did all these practical things that kind of was approved by everyone else around me. And that was kind of the thing to do. But, at that point in my life, I was starting to ask, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? So, on one hand is, I know I wanted to travel. And then the other is, professionally, what do I want to do? So I embarked on this Doctor of Psychology studies, which then led me to discovering coaching, which at that point, that was when I realized, that's what I want to do instead of, with psychology, it's more about therapy and kind of pulling people out of the gutters, even though I have a lot of respect for people who do that. But I realized that wasn't what gave me the energy. I much more preferred to take people from good to great and work with kind of like a professional crowd and, get them to really understand where they want to get to. And so then I was at a point where I have this idea of wanting to travel. And then professionally, I was also evolving on the side while doing my corporate job. This was in Singapore. That's where I was living for almost 10 years. And then I saw this ad it must have been Facebook, and it said, travel the world with us while working. And immediately my thought was, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I've been looking for. I want to travel, but I also want to work. And so I started doing the applications and I ended up getting in. But then, of course, fear kicked in and said, well, how are you going to do this? Right. So at that point, I still didn't have a job that I could do remotely. So what this company does is, at first I thought maybe they'll give me a job that allows me to travel and work. But actually, it doesn't work that way. You actually have to bring in your own job. You already need to have a job that you can do remotely. And you're basically traveling with a group of people to form your community. So basically, what they give you is co-working space, accommodation, and also this group of people and some activities that you can do in each city. And so after some months of debate, kind of really confronting my fears that said, how are you going to do this? Or, so my thought was basically, if I were to do this, I would have to quit my corporate job in Singapore, quit my very comfortable lifestyle there, my good friends, all of that, and go on this journey for a year to 12 cities, 12 months, and pursue coaching while doing this. And so there was a lot of what if, it doesn't work type of questions. Oh, if coaching doesn't work, what if you can't find another corporate job? And at that time, I was in my mid 30s and I said, oh, actually, most people probably are going to be in their 20s. And, I already did a year of MBA, that was kind of a year abroad. And why do I want to do this again at this age? All my friends are married and have kids, all this, judgmental questions and, thoughts about why this wouldn't work happened. And I basically had to confront them and basically kind of calm each one of them down. And eventually, there was kind of an incident that happened that basically kicked me to basically make the decision. And I'm not going to get into too much in detail, but basically involved missing a flight and realizing, perhaps the universe is showing me something that I need to do this rather than, going back to my comfortable life in Singapore. And so I know that's kind of a long answer, but yeah, that's how I came to deciding to do this 1 year of remote year.
It's really interesting because quite often people who take a year off will do it because they don't like their job. And you had all of these things going on that you were really enjoying. So and the fact that this program, I hadn't realized until you were just saying that this program requires you to bring the job with you. That's really interesting too, because maybe you could tell us a little bit about, for people who are interested in the program, sort of maybe ballpark what the costs are, or whether, are the destinations set, or do you choose them, or those kinds of things?
Yeah, great. So this company is called Remote Year. They're still in operation. They have changed their leadership and, operations a bit, and, maybe even philosophy a little bit. So I couldn't tell you, the latest, but I know still ballpark, they're still doing what I was doing. So I did it in 2018 to 2019. And so at that time, I was basically paying $2,000 a month and I think a 3,000 deposit or administration fee. And so the whole year ended up being about, I think, 27,000 US dollars. And it included accommodation in each of these cities. It included, and the accommodation is usually, I would say, about half shared accommodation between 2 to 3 roommates and your own apartment, like a studio or a 1-bedroom. And a co-working space that you can use, to do your work, that usually are quite nice, with a lot of workstations and, phone booths, etc. And 3 activities in each city, cultural activities that allows you to get to know the city, the culture, the people. And I really enjoyed those activities. They were great. And let's see, in terms of the city, so I went to 3 continents, and that's why my book about, it's a search across 3 continents. So we started in Africa, in Cape Town, South Africa, and then went to Marrakesh, Morocco, and then did 4 months in Europe. Started with Valencia, Spain, then did Belgrade, Serbia, then Split, Croatia, and then Lisbon, Portugal. And then we moved to South America, did 2 months in Argentina, in Buenos Aires and Cordoba, and then 1 month in Lima, Peru, and then Medellin and Bogota in Colombia, and ended in Mexico City. So those are the cities I went to. So in terms of, can you decide your own cities? You can't quite choose, oh, I'll do 1 month here, 1 month there. Although I know that the company, I think now has 1 month programs. So, if that is something you're curious about, it's certainly something you can test out, but just choosing a city that you're the most interested in. At the time that I did it, they actually only had the 1 year program. And, at the time I thought, I kind of wish we had some shorter programs. And as soon as our program started, I think they started having some 4 months programs. But, now looking back in hindsight, I'm actually so glad I did the full year, because so much of the learning came from, being in that group, and a lot of the internal things, thoughts, emotions that got triggered from the group, such as, feelings of rejection, feelings of not belonging, feeling like even some of the childhood stuff, of me, coming from China to the US, feeling like the odd one out. And a lot of those feelings got triggered from that group. And because I had that whole year, and I talk about it in my book, and that's why it's as much about a outside journey as an inside one. And for me, it took actually the full year for me to experience those feelings, let them come up, having myself like rejecting those feelings or resisting those feelings, and then finally accepting them and reconciling them and moving forward, and almost healing that part of me, and coming out so much stronger and more resilient. And so, for me, that year really served me. But, having said that, there are 1 month programs, and I do think it could be, a cool thing for anyone to give a try, provided that you have the right expectations of what this kind of a program is. And I know this group, for most people, you're solo travelers, and that's amazing. I did a lot of solo trips during that year, on my own. I wasn't just with the group all the time. And some of the most amazing, profound experiences I had were the times that I took off on my own.
What was one of your favorite solo trips that you did during that year?
Oh, well, it has to be to the Amazon jungle in Peru, given what has happened since then, how much I connected with it, and and the fact that I even bought a lodge, and, bought a house, turned it into a lodge and retreat center, and now I do retreats there. It was truly profound, and it was truly unexpected. I, went on this journey for the year. What did I hope to gain? Definitely travel. That was a passion of mine, and also to discover a little bit more about myself. That was part of it as well. And that was the main thing. And then, of course, professionally, I was building this new career in coaching. Of course, I wanted to progress a bit there as well. And at the time, I was also doing research for my doctorate dissertation. But discovering the Peruvian Amazon, it was just so outside of anything that I had ever expected, because that part of the world I wasn't even familiar with. Even though I had traveled a fair amount before this year, I hadn't been to South America very much. I had been to Argentina and Brazil, but for business trips. So really, didn't get to experience the culture all that much. And being in Peru, and actually a couple months leading up to Peru, that was when I had heard about these traditional plant and animal healing modalities, which just sounded so fascinating. I mean, I didn't even have vocabulary or anywhere in my consciousness that, stored that knowledge, or had that, was even open to that knowledge. But the more I heard about it, the more I just found, wow, this is actually kind of almost like a personal development modality. And, being a coach, and, having studied psychology and being introspective, I'm like, well, I'm interested in anything that allows you to grow and transform a little bit. And so that was what interested me to go to the Amazon jungle in Peru and do a week of retreat with these plant medicines. And initially I also resisted. That week was almost like simulating how it was for me for that year. Initially like having my expectations not met, and kind of feeling like I'm not having such a great time and resisting that experience. And then finally just dropping in and starting to accept. It was actually something that the shaman said, maybe if you can't just expect ayahuasca to give you something, you got to put in your own work, right? And that kind of woke me up. And as soon as I realized that was when everything started opening up. And that's when that experience just became so transformational and so profound that so I did that in November of 2018. And that's when I realized, wow, I want to bring more people to this kind of experience, and not only experience the jungle and the plant medicines, but also provide some components of personal development, because I felt, with that and the powerfulness of the plant medicines, you can gain so much more. And so in January, I already took a group of people to that same lodge to do a retreat. So that was before I bought this lodge, and coincidentally the owner was selling the place. And several months later I said, all right, let me buy it. And so that's what happened. So that was definitely the most meaningful side trip that I took that year.
You really never know what's going to come out of a solo trip, do you?
Absolutely. I would say, the big thing is really just being open-minded. I think if I was closed-minded, like the first 4 days I was in the jungle, I wouldn't have taken nearly as much as I ended up taking. But it was all about, opening my mind, opening my heart, looking at what you're resisting and learning something from it and then coming out of it. And yeah, that's how I think you can grow so tremendously.
So I have a question here from Rose. So at the Amazon, was it closer to the end of the trip? What month was that?
That was month 9. Yes. And thank you for being curious about that. Yes. Was there a follow-up, Janice? Sorry.
Who did you do the retreat with?
Okay. Yeah. So, the reason that I think towards the end of the trip was important was because I actually had this kind of internal transformation in month 7. That was when I realized, I can't just resist this group, because I actually thought about leaving, in month 7. I was so close to leaving because I thought, I could, why be with this group? I could just do this on my own. I actually thought, why don't I just do the solo trip on my own? I can create my own workspace and, do my own work and travel to these cities. But because of that realization, I decided to stay. And that was the other reason that I believe that this trip also became so profound, because I was at a point where I was more open to receiving. And who was the retreat with? It was basically with a couple who are guides in both the jungle tours as well as plant medicine. And then they brought me to this house, and we basically did all the ceremonies there. They took me around jungle tours. And so this is the house that I ended up buying. And now I'm actually hosting retreats in this house. Of course, the house looks very different now because I've expanded it by quite a bit. So I don't just take people who go there for retreats anymore. It's also a place where travelers can come if they basically want to spend a couple of days in the Amazon and do some jungle tours or just experience the beauty of the jungle. They can come and stay there in a room, or they can join the retreats with me, which includes all the components that I experience myself, such as ayahuasca ceremonies, combo, San Pedro, jungle tours, but also I add personal development workshops to basically help you to connect what you're learning with the plants to something that we're more familiar with, such as the concepts of, the workshops, coaching, just giving you a holistic way that you can look at your life, setting intentions and creating some action plans that you can take forward after you go back from the retreat. And then there's also some follow-up coaching involved.
Mhm. And the background photo, is that a picture of the Amazon?
No, unfortunately, it's not. It's just basically I don't my marketing person found this photo. I quite like it. I like this flowing idea of like, flowing with the universe. That was kind of almost a theme for that year. And I think also just for any kind of travel, you need to be able to flow a little bit, rather than have all your plans set. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another question, what is the best time of year to visit you and the Amazon?
Oh, really, it's all year round, because the Amazon is the tropics, so temperature-wise, it's the same. There's only a dry season versus a rainy season, so they're just coming out of the rainy season. So from about late April to October, beginning of October, is considered the dry season, so you won't get a whole lot of rain. And then from October to April, there's more rain. But I actually quite like it during the rainy season, just because it kind of cools things down a little bit. Whereas, in May to August can be very hot.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Mm.
That's all I've got right now.
Okay. What would you say? So you were basically a digital nomad for a year.
Mm.
What were some of the challenges of that?
Yeah, well, that was the first time I became a digital nomad. And I understand now it's 4 years later, as since COVID, I think a lot more people understand this concept of digital nomad, or even, people who weren't digital nomads, became one because they couldn't go into their office. They had to work from their homes. But at that time, I would say the one, I don't know if it's just being a digital nomad or just having to start my business for the very first time. There were a lot of firsts on this during this 1 year. And so, just building up a coaching practice, even if you weren't traveling, it's pretty challenging, or building any kind of business, for the first time. So there were challenges around that, getting clients. Anyone who is a coach here probably will understand, getting your own clients, or if you're a consultant or any kind of, client service business, you probably understand there's, work that needs to be done with regards to client acquisition. So that was challenging. And then, the other was also, being a coach, starting out, I wasn't making that much money. Right. So the money aspect, so I actually wrote about it in my book in the second month. I really had to confront that. And I was lucky enough to have been quite diligent with my investments. So I started quite early, and I had built a good enough financial ground for me to actually do this, even though, I was making some money, but a lot of it was also because, okay, I have this investment base that even if I didn't make anything, I feel like, okay, I wouldn't be on the street, or I would have to drop out of the program and wouldn't be able to do it. So that was challenging. What else? But actually, most of it is really great. It's exciting. It's fun, right? I mean, the freedom that I felt almost for the first time in my life, and that I really experienced even just on that first day of being in Cape Town, sitting at this restaurant, overlooking this mountain. Cape Town has a lot of mountains, and I just realized, wow. And I was with this group of people I never met before. I didn't quite connect with any of them at that time yet, but just that feeling of sitting there and realizing I had a whole year ahead of me to be doing this. That was just, such feelings of freedom that I hadn't experienced, and it was so exhilarating. And so, I feel like the challenges, they were solvable. And the good much more outweigh the bad.
It sounds wonderful. Were the other participants in the program, were they from all over the world, or were they?
Yeah. I would say majority were Americans and majority women, actually. So when I joined the program, I had expected to have a very large group, because they kept telling us, all the previous groups were like 70 or 75 people. And I thought, wow, that's pretty big. at the same time, I thought, okay, well, it's just 75 people. I'm for sure going to find a few people that I could connect with. That was probably the biggest fear that I had, aside from some of the other ones around work, was, was I going to connect with people in the group? So our group ended up being much smaller. It was 29 people. And a lot of people had issues with that, feeling like, they were expecting one thing and got something else. And I kind of had some of those feelings too. And the other surprising thing was the ratio between men and women. For some reason, it was almost 80% women, 75% women. And majority American, maybe one or two Canadian, let's see, a couple people from Europe, a couple people from Australia. Yeah, so that was kind of the makeup of the group. Yeah.
Now, you've already talked about this a bit, but in the title of your book, you sort of hint at the fact that, or maybe more than hint, that this year abroad involved a lot of self-reflection and discovery. And can you share with us a bit of that process?
Yeah. I'll just talk a little bit more. I feel like I kind of touch on it a little bit, with regards to the emotional or internal process that went on. It's kind of like anyone who's familiar with the Kubler-Ross curve of it's about, team working, but I think also can apply to one's individual feelings and emotions. So what that, there are 4 phases, which is forming, storming, norming, and performing. So it looks like goes kind of high and then dips and then goes way higher in the end. So for me, it was kind of like that, coming in, I had this excitement, right? Like sitting in that place in Cape Town, feeling this exhilaration, this anticipation of this freedom and excitement for this year. So that was amazing. And then I would say from about months 2 to month 6, it was that dip. In my internal process, don't get me wrong, there were so many great things that I was doing on the outside, right? So many first experiences, and I talk about them in my book too, like the second month we were in Marrakesh, and I had this just like blissful experience, this moment of just sitting on a park bench outside of the Medina, the old town, and just feeling complete bliss, for no reason at all, and that was beautiful. And I so much treasure those moments when you can just be so present and feel so great. And so I definitely had those moments, or, in Split, Croatia, being able to swim in the sea every day. I just love that. So I had so many amazing experiences on the outside, but on the inside, there was a lot of turmoil, mainly coming from the group. Like, I don't feel like I really belong, even though I made 4 really good friends out of the 29 people. And the group kept getting a little bit smaller and smaller because people were leaving. But still, there was for some reason, I felt this need to be accepted and to be loved by everyone, to become friends with everyone. And every opportunity when I didn't feel that way, it was kind of draining my energy. And I've realized up until month 7, I focused on that so much that that was the resistance that I was talking about. And that was what led to month 7, when we got to Buenos Aires, that's when I started contemplating, why am I even doing it in this group? And by the way, 2 of my best friends had already left by the end of month 6. So that was a big dent on my experience as well. I felt like they were my support group, and now 2 of them are already gone. And then I still have 2 really good ones. Actually, my best friend was still there. But then both of them seem like they're also contemplating leaving. So then I went, what am I doing here? All the people that I really connect with have left or are going to leave. And so why not just leave as well, do this on my own. And so that was kind of this big kind of internal, the storming period that happened from this month 6 to 7. And then in month 7, I talked to the program leader, and I even thought about, I'm going to I didn't think I was going to leave for good, but I thought I would quote unquote opt out, which basically means you're still somewhat connected with the group, but you're not paying the full price. You're not, using their accommodation or co-working space, but they were still just getting some emails and, some resources from them. And then the program leader, she asked me some good questions, which really kind of woke me up, because she said, well, I don't think you're very clear on what you want or, why you're leaving. At first it was kind of jarring, but then I'm like, yeah, maybe you're right. And then she asked me a question about, what have you contributed to the group? And again, it was very jarring. It's like, what are you saying? Are you accusing me? I feel like I've done a lot. I try to lead these like group sessions, like getting people to learn, these growth sessions, I feel like I've done a lot. And she's like, no, I don't mean that, that's great that you did that. But what about like just being yourself, being vulnerable with the group? And that's what woke me up, because I realized, what, maybe I haven't done that. Right. I've done that with my close friends because I felt like they accepted me, they liked me, they valued me. But with other people, perhaps I was kind of guarded, and perhaps they were feeling like I'm guarded and therefore they're not opening up to me. So that's when I realized, what, I need to stop pointing fingers at other people and say what other people can do for me and how they need to change to make my experience better, and need to start thinking about what I can do to make my own experience better, and hopefully in turn also serve them more. And so that was that big wake up moment. And from that point, and my program leader also just said, what, instead of, even if you opt out, you're going to do it after the next month, right? And which is kind of when I thought about doing it. And she said, why not just in the remainder of this month and next month, just, have fun, be yourself, right? Just don't think too much about, trying to like lead all these things, like use your intellectual self, which I was very good at. She's like, show this more fun side of you. And then I said, what, I'm going to take on this challenge. That's fine. I can do that. That sounds easier than like trying to rack my brain, trying to like create all these like classes or, the sessions to lead people. And so that's what I did. So I started, opening up more, started becoming, even with people that I didn't know that well, started being more vulnerable, started sharing more about myself, my feelings. And, I'm still not best friends with the rest of the people, but did I have a better experience since that moment? Absolutely. And that's also what contributed to me discovering the Amazon, because I was more open-minded, because in the Amazon, there were so many things that was against my expectation as well. And I could have resisted that as well, but I'm so glad I didn't. And that's what led to some profound learning and transformation. And
what a learning, Kristina. Yeah, and actually you just answered Melinda's question, what stopped you from leaving? So you made that very clear. That's very, very interesting. She also wanted to know if you learned any languages along the way.
Oh, well, I attempted to learn Spanish, and I'm quite embarrassed to say I'm still not very good, given that I have a lodge in Peru. But I had no Spanish background at all. So my first language is Chinese, given I was born in China. And then my second language is actually German, because I lived in Germany for 2 years when I was young. And so I was quite fluent in that. So, in high school, I also continued to learn German. So I didn't take up any Spanish. But in Buenos Aires, which is month 7, I started taking some Spanish classes with the remote year group, because they provided that on the side. And yeah, I mean, I can now kind of get by with my Spanish in Peru, but it's definitely not great.
Melinda is asking if you experience any safety issues when you were traveling?
Yeah, good question. I know that's a big concern, especially for women. And I must say, in all my travels, so during that year, especially, I'll say just 2 places in the world that I felt remotely unsafe. One is in Rio in Brazil. That was before that year. And during that year was actually the first month in Cape Town in South Africa. There are parts of the city that can be a bit unsafe. And especially also they kept telling us to take all these precautions. And of course, there are facts substantiating how it was kind of unsafe because, one person in the group got their credit card snatched from them as they were using it at the ATM machine, or, people got their phones stolen, from their backpacks, on their backs, things like that. But, and there were, and I think in Cape Town, what it was just such a big difference in social classes. And that was a bit sad to see, so we would go to some of these nice restaurants and we would see all the waiters, being African, right? Black African, and then all the diners being white. And so that was that big stark contrast. And that's, I believe, is what resulted in a lot of the safety issues there. But other than that, I can't say that I ever felt unsafe, as a single woman. And I didn't have troubles taking solo trips basically anywhere.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that it was about 27,000 for the year to pay to them. Do you know what you paid for the entire year in terms of your food and things?
Yeah.
You know what that entire budget was?
I would say probably double that in terms of for everything. So yeah, probably around 50,000, 55,000 of expenses. And, could you do it for less? Absolutely. Because we did go to some nice places, nice restaurants, right? And because I do like fine dining from time to time. Like we took a trip to the Basque Country when we were in Spain, went to a 3 Michelin star restaurant, and that took some cash. But, do you have to do that? Absolutely not. Can you have an amazing experience, without doing that and spending much less? I think absolutely, especially a lot of these countries, depending on the exchange rate, like in Argentina, the week that we got there, the currency dropped literally, I think, by 25%. So the dollar just got that much stronger. And so, everything became so cheap. I mean, all the places that we went to, all the cities that I went to that I listed, basically, if you look at the cost of living is, 50%, 70% of that in North America. So, you can absolutely do it very economically.
Yeah. Rose is asking whether you have much opportunity to interact with the indigenous people in the Amazon where you are.
Yeah, I mean, basically all the people that work for me and all the people in the village are indigenous. If you're talking about like indigenous tribes, well, they don't have a lot of those anymore. I mean, when we go to jungle tours, we'll go see one tribe called the Yaguas, and even they, they'll dress up for us kind of the traditional way that they used to dress, but they don't really do that anymore today. But all the people that I interact with on a regular basis in the Amazon, so the city is called Iquitos, they're all indigenous. You look at them, they're, they look like they're from there. They actually look quite, the first time I landed in Iquitos, I actually felt a lot of the vibes of the Philippines, of the island in the Philippines, like, Palawan. So yes, lots of opportunities.
And how large is that village? You've called it a village and you called it a city. So how large?
Well, okay, so sorry. So Iquitos is the city. So that's definitely a city. It's about almost 750,000 people. It's actually the largest city that you cannot get to by road. You can either fly into it or you can get there by boat. So it is a city. However, my lodge is in Santa Maria, which is a village, an hour boat ride from Iquitos. So Iquitos is also one of the largest cities in the Amazon. And then there are all these small villages along the Amazon outside of Iquitos. So that's where my lodge is.
Okay. And the transportation between over the 12 months when you're going to different cities, were you basically flying from one to the other, or did you do a land transportation or?
Yes, flying to all the places. Oh yeah, and then that's one thing I forgot to mention. The 27,000 actually also included the flights between the cities.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically it was your accommodation, the cooperative workspace, and your flights between the cities.
Flights and 3 activities in each city.
Yeah.
And the activities are actually really fun, like very unique things like, in Morocco, we would dine with a Moroccan family and eat home cooked meals. Or let's see, what else was something really memorable? A lot of food involved activities. In Lima, we took a cooking class, of their traditional foods. Or there was something, more sightseeing as well. Or, a bike trip in Lisbon. We did a bike trip for a whole day, around Lisbon. That was beautiful. And then stop by someone's home, to have a home cooked meal. So they really try to provide you these experiences you can't just find through a normal tour. So I really think that they actually do that quite well.
It sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds great.
And Kristina, you had mentioned about the ayahuasca, I think that's how it's pronounced, because that's something I've heard about and I've always been curious about, but I don't know a lot about it. However, I do remember when I was reading your book a few months ago, it seemed like it was quite a memorable experience, to say the least, for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any sort of guidance or thoughts for anyone that's thinking about trying that experience, like what to expect, just because it is so different, and I just don't know if everyone is prepared for the adventure that they might be getting themselves into?
Yeah, okay. I can certainly provide my perspective. And so I was just in Peru about 2 weeks ago, hosting a retreat there. And on that trip, I just realized again how this medicine is so intelligent and so deep and profound that no matter how you try to communicate what it is to people who haven't experienced it, you're never going to be able to communicate the full extent of what it is. Because I was still, after about 17 ceremonies, which is actually not many compared to, many people who have sat in 80 or 100 or these shamans. But even having had some experience, I was still learning so many new things every single time. And so how I would describe it is it's a medicine. Well, it's two plants. It's basically the ayahuasca vine and the chacruna leaf. That's the very traditional kind of recipe of the ayahuasca brew. And the ayahuasca vine, that's the kind of the one that is intelligent. It has a lot of substances, components in there, and it can give you this kind of purging effect. And that's why you might hear of people throwing up when they're doing ayahuasca, or going to the bathroom, or having bodily sensations. So that is from the ayahuasca vine. And then the brew, because it's combined with chacruna, and chacruna enables the DMT that is in the ayahuasca to be activated. Sorry, the ayahuasca enables the DMT in the chacruna to be activated. So the chacruna gives this DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, which is something that we all produce in our body, but in very small doses. When it's produced in large doses, it can give us visions, it can give us hallucinations, it can give us feelings and thoughts that we may not have in our waking day of consciousness. So if you think about combining these two, basically you could experience visions, you could experience a lot of bodily cleansing, and then, and the combination thereof. And for me, a lot of people, the biggest thing that perhaps they relate when they think about ayahuasca, they think about the visions, they think about the hallucinations, like the pictures they're going to see, and that's great, and you might see that. For me, actually, I didn't see any of that the first many times that I took ayahuasca. And even this time, when I went back there in my retreat, we did 3 ceremonies, and the first 2 ceremonies I got pretty good visions, interesting visions, fun, it was interesting to watch. I couldn't really make too much meaning out of it. But it was then the 3rd ceremony, where I actually didn't get much vision at all, that I had the most profound learning. Right. So, and that's what made me realize, with ayahuasca, you just cannot expect anything going into it. Have a very open mind. If you expect to see visions, and then you don't, you're going to be disappointed. And then you're going to miss out on the learning that you're going to get from that medicine. And so, here are, you can certainly read about all these people having these experiences on the internet. It may sound great, and you go wanting to do that, chasing that. I would say don't do that. Have a really realistic expectation, or better yet, no expectation at all, but some intentions, perhaps, intentions of what it is that you want to learn, what it is that you want to heal, what new information you want to get, how do you want it to improve yourself. If you go in with those intentions, I think then you're going to do great.
It's so interesting. It's something I know absolutely nothing about. And there are, I have, of course, it's represented in films and TV shows very differently, right? And as you were saying, that it's all the big visions. But as with anything, better to go in without expectations.
Yeah.
So I think I know the answer to this question, but maybe I don't. But now that you have completed the program and you've been out of it for a few years, is it something, would you do it again? Would you recommend it to other travelers? How do you, or, do you think that you would have learned as much about yourself as you did if you had just taken a year and traveled on your
own? I don't know if I would, if I just took a year off and traveled on my own. Because I don't think I would have had those difficult experiences that I had with the group. And that was a big part of my learning and my transformation. But would I do it again now, being the Kristina now, in 2022? I don't think I would. Well, one, because I've already done that. And because now, my priorities are different. I have a partner now, I like to travel with him. And so that, right. So that's that. So would I recommend it to people? I absolutely would. Well, with a caveat is, well, just like with anything, I don't know if it's good for everyone, right? I think it's really about your own intention and what you want to get out of a travel experience, and I think, with my experience, perhaps be prepared that you might have some, challenging experiences with the group. And, are you okay to deal with that? If you are, and you're open to experiencing something quite special for a year or 4 months, I think, or they do it for 1 month, absolutely go do it. And if you've always done only solo trips, maybe this is something different that you want to do for a month or 4 months, to change things up and to see how you might be in a group. And of course, if you know yourself and you say, I absolutely could not be with 28 other people, for a month, let alone a year, right? I just know that about myself, then don't, right? But if you say, hey, that might be a stretch experience for me, I know I'm not comfortable with it, but let me give it a try and see how that might change me or improve me in some way, transform me in some way, then absolutely.
Great. This has been so interesting. I think unless anybody else has any remaining questions, I think we might kind of wrap it up here. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us tonight. It's been really very interesting. And I look forward to reading your book. I haven't read it yet, but I really look forward to reading it. And thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us today.
Yeah, of course. It was such a pleasure. It was so fun. And thank you so much for giving me this experience to talk about myself and my experiences. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation.